Welcome to Over the River and Through the Woods. I'm Jill.
I'm Charles.
And we just recorded an entire interview and discovered that the lighting had changed from when we started it and the video was unusable. So you will be hearing the audio of our question and answer session over pretty pictures of winter in Vermont, which is probably how it should have been in the first place. This is our second audience-inspired Q&A session. And if you've been following our videos for 2.5 years, we really appreciate you. That's what's kept us making videos, even though so few people have even known about them. Over the past few months, we've had a few developments. We had a home tour on a major home tour channel called Exploring Alternatives, and we're really grateful for the exposure that gave our next two videos. One of those two videos was one of the more vulnerable videos that we've shot here, and we gave you a window into our lives, and a lot of you were very supportive. Some were not. It's really awkward for our channel to have grown so much in this particular moment, but we're hoping that in the long run, it will be a good thing. We're going to talk a little bit about our philosophy and especially some of the things that we've never really talked about explicitly on this channel before that seem to confuse a lot of our new audience. One sentiment that we've seen over and over again in recent comments is, why do you make your life so hard for yourselves? Just go live in the city like everybody else.
Why would we want to do that?
Why would we want to live in the city like everybody else?
We did that for a very long time.
We did that. We did that for decades. Been there, done that.
And it was a means to an end to get into the woods.
Why is it worth the extra work that we've placed upon ourselves, namely building an off-grid home and chopping firewood and those kinds of chores?
Because it's what we want to do. It's how we want to live. I mean, it's a lot of our viewers seem to think that it's a really hard lifestyle that isn't, I mean, obviously wouldn't be worth it to them to do, but it's just normal living. If you live in the country, you're going to have a lot of these same chores to do.
So you like to build things.
I do. I like to chop firewood.
I actually like stacking firewood when I get a chance.
Yes, it can be physically hard, but a lot of things can be physically hard. I'm sure a lot of our audience goes out and goes to the gym and exercises and does all kinds of things that are physically hard.
Speaking for myself, I like living in the woods. If living out here while Charles is building our living situation is part of the price of that, I'm happy to pay it. And you actually enjoy a lot of the work that goes into designing and building.
Yes. Just because it's hard work doesn't mean it's not enjoyable. So, I mean, that's kind of the answer to the question is, why do we do all that, make it so hard on ourselves? Because we enjoy what we're doing.
Why did we give up our careers to move to a rural place and build our own home? Because we wanted to have extraordinary experiences that are meaningful to us. And some of the comments referred to off-grid living as a form of escapism, which I find really interesting. And if we have escaped, I hope what we have escaped is the desire to conform to what other people think you should be doing. And
We've
if
also
we
escaped from the rat race, from the stress of, it's not fun for me to work for somebody and go home and be thinking about work, thinking what you have to do the next day, and having deadlines, having stress. That's what we spent many, many years trying to get away from. And this is how we're doing it.
So while this winter has not been especially easy for us, and when it got hardest, we pulled out the camera and had it rolling the whole time. That was part of a much larger story, and I hope people will recognize that. And it was not the end of the story either. So we had a lot of comments along the lines of, you won't be independent for long. When you're elderly, you'll need help. Think about chopping firewood at age 75 to 80. And I actually have some pretty strong feelings about these comments, because the idea that you should be living the life that you can look forward to in 20 or 30 years today, I find really disturbing.
I mean, are we supposed to put in ADA ramps and have our wheelchair sitting by the front door ready for that, getting ready for that?
Well, I don't know if some of the people who make these comments might be living that way. And if they are, and that makes them happy, that's great. But the reason that we didn't wait until we were ready to retire to do this is exactly because we know we won't be independent forever. And we know we can't be chopping firewood 20 or 30 years from now.
Maybe. My stepdad still chops firewood. And he's at least 75, I think.
So, no, we won't be able to do this forever. I mean, life has changed, and we have come to terms with that. And we don't know what we're going to be doing a year from now. We're trying to figure that out, what we'll be doing a year from now. But we don't know what we'll be doing 5 years from now, and we can't even conceive of what we'll be doing 10 years from now. So we're okay with that. We're okay with that type of uncertainty, and it's actually kind of liberating.
We're doing what we want to do while we can do it.
So we're not going to tell anybody else how to live their lives, even though lots of people seem to think that if you put your life on YouTube, you want to be told how to live your life. The one thing that I would ask people to think about is, what do you want to be doing right now? And are you doing it? And if you're not doing it, what would it take? What kind of change would it take to do more of what you want to be doing right now? And whatever that means for you, we would encourage you to pursue it. So when we put up the drone, it looks like we're in the middle of nowhere. And to be honest, that's not really the case. We do live in a rural area, but we're not in the middle of nowhere. And we've had questions like, how close is the nearest hospital? What about the bears? Aren't we worried about them? And we've actually answered those types of questions in a previous Q&A, so I will link to that here. So, on the one hand, we have the people thinking we should move back to the city and make lives convenient for ourselves. And on the other hand, we've had even more comments along the lines of, what you're doing is not off-grid living.
Which really irritates me. We never anticipated living a hard off-grid life. I mean, that's just not what we were going to do.
Well, it wasn't our goal. It was, I mean, if that's something that makes someone happy, that's great, and we admire that, but that was never our goal in the first place. And just to be clear, we're not an off-grid living channel. We are a do-it-yourself home build channel, and we happen to be off-grid, so we put that in the titles and descriptions. But when people see the words off-grid, they have a very specific image in their mind of what off-grid living should look like.
Their definition of off-grid living is living in a log cabin with no electricity, no running water. Sure, that's off-grid living, but that's not the definition that I use for off-grid. In its most basic form, off-grid is just that. You're not connected to an electrical grid. We happen to go a little farther. We have no utilities coming up here at all. No water, no electricity, but we have those systems for ourselves. A solar electric system. We have water catchment for our water and a large underground cistern. The ones of you that complain about this is not off-grid living see that we have all the modern conveniences of living on-grid, and it's true.
So the reason that I include the word off-grid in our titles and descriptions is that when we arrived, we didn't have any power, we didn't have any water. We had a brand new septic system that we had just hired to have put in. And everything else that's here, Charles has built with his own hands. And that's why it was a story worth telling. Okay, so more technical questions. What are we doing in a yurt in the winter in Vermont?
Living.
But why?
Why? Why not?
So when we first envisioned what we would do with this property, we had dreams of building a passive solar earthship. And for technical reasons that we won't get into today, that became not very practical, at least in the short term, on our particular piece of property with the budget that we have. So when we originally decided to put up a yurt, we did it for several reasons. One was to have intermediate housing between the RV and whatever might come next. And two was that we might rent it out as a short-term rental in the long term as a source of income. We still haven't decided what the ultimate fate of this yurt will be, but for now, it's a pretty comfortable place to live. And despite our recent complications, it's actually done pretty well in the winter.
It has done very well in the winter. I've been very impressed with it, actually. For no more insulation than it does have, it is sealed up tight. I feel like I did a great job of getting it tight so it's not really drafty at all.
And just for those who might not know the whole backstory, the floor is built on structural insulated panels, which are a sandwich of 5 inches of foam. We do have insulation in the walls and the ceiling. It's a bubble wrap lined with aluminum foil on both sides.
A radiant barrier, yeah.
It's only 1/2 inch thick.
We have snow that accumulates on the roof, even when we've got it heated in here to 70 degrees. So obviously there's enough insulation in there to help keep the warmth from going through the roof material and melting the snow off the roof. The only time the snow really melts off the roof is when the sun hits it.
So in the future, especially if we do decide to stay in the yurt long term, we might insulate the walls and the ceiling.
Maybe.
It's a big project. It'll be expensive. It'll be time consuming. It'll be quite an investment. So we might do that in the future.
And we might not. I mean, the systems are working fine. I mean, yes, when it gets really cold, it's a little challenging to keep the fire going and keep it heated in here, but the systems as designed are working really as intended.
Today is a day in the 20s Fahrenheit, but the sun is out, so we're basically letting the fire die for most of the afternoon because otherwise it would be too hot in here.
It's been below 0 Fahrenheit. The first few times it got there, I was staying up till midnight or later. But since then, I've really figured out that's not necessary.
And if I had a nickel for everyone who said in the comments, just get a wood stove,
That would make things worse. The way our system works is we've got a radiant floor heat system, and I've got that going through our rocket mass heater. So the rocket mass heater actually, we distribute the heat from the rocket mass heater through the entire floor, and that helps to even out the warmth across the entire building. With just a wood stove, we wouldn't have as much thermal mass as we have now. And then the yurt would change temperatures very quickly. We would have a harder time keeping it warm at night when the fire goes out. And when it gets to be good bed of coals, we shut all the vents and the dampers and shut it all the way down. So it's just sitting there smoldering. And by morning, a lot of times we'll still have coals in there in the morning, and sometimes we won't. The other thing with our radiant floor heat is we do have a backup heat source for the floor. We can actually heat water with our on-demand water heater, and it goes through a heat exchanger, and we can run that heat through the floor. It's basically on a thermostat now, so when it gets down to 55 degrees, the right pump turns on and circulates water through the water heater. So we're heating the floor using our water heater, our propane water heater.
and it might sound chilly, the room temperature that we wake up to, but we've got layers and
really
it's not a big deal.
Even when we were living in our RV, though, we would turn the actual thermostat down to 55 when we go to bed. So it would be 55 in the morning. It's really no different. And even when we've had it down to 45 degrees in here in the morning in the really cold weather, it wasn't unbearable.
Do we have moisture problems in the yurt?
I would say no. Do we have moisture in here? At times, yes. When it gets really cold, the windows will frost over. It actually slides down as it melts and goes through the Velcro and goes to the outside. So we have not seen any mold issues. So yeah, we have vent fans when we take showers. The shower steam is vented to the outside immediately. It's never allowed out of the bathroom, really. And then if we're doing a lot of cooking or anything with boiling water, whatever, we've got the vent on the inside for cooking as well. So we don't allow a lot of moisture to really build up inside, and then we've got wood heat, so that's wood stove actually pulls moisture out.
One viewer observed that we don't have any stairways, so how do we climb into our home? We've been hopping up onto the lowest spot on the yurt platform.
Hopping?
Yes.
Stepping?
For you, it's a step. For me, it's a hop. For some of our visitors, it's not ideal, but it is temporary. This brings us to what's next.
A project coming up is to get a bridge built across to our new porch. And that will be basically level coming across to the front door. And so there will be no step up or anything. It'll just be straight across from the ground and onto the bridge and into the door. There's a couple projects which will be screening in the porch and building a couple of screen doors for going around the outside ring of our deck. Need to get rails up. We're going to be doing cable rails around the entire deck. And we're also going to get material to seal the porch to the roof so we don't have rain and snow that will slide down inside the porch.
And the rocket mass heater will get polished up and it'll eventually look nice. And once the rocket mass heater is done, we can also make the heat shield look a little more presentable. Mm-hmm. And if you're wondering why we don't do videos more often, it's for two reasons. One is that the pace of projects on the home build has slowed down a bit. And two, I have a full-time position right now, so I'm making videos in my spare time, which I don't have that much of. We are hopefully this year getting out a video on the first Saturday of every month. So of course, we hope you will join us, and we'll see you next month.
So, Charles, how do you feel about shoveling snow at this point in the winter?
Shoveling snow is one of my favorite wintertime chores, so I feel just fine about it.
That's awesome.